So anyway, all right. So I changed my creation picture, just because my creation picture tends to get a lot better. But meta narrative. So we're closing in on Christmas, and I think understanding Christmas in terms of really the big picture. One of my favorite aspects of creation is that God put His image on earth, right? That in the midst of everything that's going on, God inserts His image. And He tells that image to take care of things. And then obviously that image didn't take care of things, and so He destroyed the earth and saved, for lack of a better way of saying, the best of it. But then promised to never destroy it again because of us. When you read the Noahic covenant. And then it still wasn't working. So then He goes to Abraham and says, "Hey, I want to make you a blessing." And then that doesn't work. And then ultimately He delivers the children from Egypt, and on Sinai puts together the covenant on Sinai, which is, "I'm going to make you a royal priesthood." So we have this sort of God's image, caretakers, blessings, and ultimately royal priesthood. And we see that the Jewish people are given this tremendous opportunity to be God's select. And such a great deal, right? Does anybody remember those times when you got picked to be the person for your teacher or your coach, or you knew that they thought you were special? And if you haven't had that, you're special here. And I mean that. But there was this, the Jews were sort of selected, right? Obviously it was the Hebrews version, but for the sake of how we understand the vocabulary, they were picked, and they were given this awesome responsibility to. Every human being carries God's image, regardless of ethnicity, nationality, race, you carry God's image. The process, though, was this sort of creation of caretakers, of blessing that we're supposed to all sort of achieve. And, when you look at Christmas is a great day, right? But Christmas is not understandable, not truly comprehensible if you don't absorb the full narrative. And Augustine, who's one of my favoritists, said if you can comprehend it, it's not God. It doesn't mean that you can't make an assessment. It doesn't mean that you can't try to come up with a thesis. It doesn't mean that you can't try to gather an understanding. But if you can truly get your head around it, then it's not God. Great exercise, right? Comprehending eternity. It almost hurts your brain after a half a second, so you quit. Right? It's kind of like when you're putting together something from IKEA. Like after like a half a minute, you just go, "I'm done. I quit." Right? It's hard to gather. Like, it's easy to get the first couple of years, right? Sounds like fun. I just usually assume like heavenly softball games, and, having a good time, and golf where every shot, regardless of how bad it looks, lands in the hole. Right? Because that would be fun for like a couple of years. And just all these amazing things, getting to meet the heroes of the faith, and getting to meet the heroes of the faith in your family that maybe you never even knew. Great-great-grandpa, great-great-grandma that happened to be something or whatever. But then after you get past that point, it starts to hurt your brain. And all of a sudden you start thinking, wait, so it never reverts? Because we're taught to think in beginning and end, right? Everything in life is about beginning and end. Now, we may not want to embrace end, but everything in life is about beginning and end. And so eternity is this idea where there's suddenly no end, there's no finality to it. And so we struggle to comprehend it. And other things are that way too. Creation, science, which is a field full of intelligent, researchers, and they're still trying to figure out the beginning. There's various theories, and as someone who's taught science, there's various theories, and all these, in the school we teach all these different theories, right? There's a lot of theories, and there's also a number of assumptions we've made. And some of them are grandiose assumptions, right? My favorite has always been the Big Bang, right? Because it sounds good. Except that where did whatever went bang come from? And that's ultimately where it breaks down. And then you have some of these other tremendous theories about, the moon was started because of rock hit Earth and then moon hived off. And okay, where'd the hole go? Well, it was replaced by, whatever. There's a lot of things, a lot of ideas, but the ability, we can't really comprehend it ultimately. And so in this plan that is Christmas, one of the hardest things for us to understand, and I think one of the most important things that we understand, is that Christmas is not a moment, that's meant to be pulled out of the narrative and looked at in a singular fashion. It's not a moment that we're supposed to look at and go, hey, Jesus, right? And his golden diapers and his, we're not supposed to pull it out. It's a part of this narrative. And so John chapter 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and in this case the Word is Jesus. In the beginning is Jesus, right? And Jesus was with God, right? And the Word was. So you have this establishment of, from the Gospel of John all the way back to the book of Genesis. And he was with God in the beginning. And then it says, through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness hasn't overcome it. One of the great sentences, right? Because darkness can't overcome light. No matter how intense darkness wants to be, light wins. Right? You don't walk into a super dark room, turn on the flashlight, and have darkness win. Right? It doesn't go, no, it doesn't work, it's too dark. Right? It doesn't work that way. But that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Okay? And one of my favorite layouts has always been this one. Right? So we have this concept of the fall of humanity. Okay? And then attached to that, we have the redemption of humanity. Okay, which is the Christ event. Okay, we have this process of redemption. Now, the process of redemption began right off the bat, right? I just showed you about Noah, Abraham, Sinai. You can include the David. You can include all these different covenants you read about in the Old Testament. But this process of redemption began early on. And the reason it began early on is because the fall of humanity is not where the decision was made. The decision was made before it. So God, because if you don't believe that, then you have this belief that somehow God is responsive, right? That God's sitting there going, I had no idea you guys were going to do that. That doesn't work, right? The idea that God knew. He knew from the beginning that Adam and Eve were going to do what they did. Now, you heard me talk ad nauseum about Adam and Eve and that sin, but the idea that he knew from the beginning what they were going to do. He knew from the beginning the result of creation and the first two commandments. He knew from the beginning what would happen with Noah. He knew from the beginning what would happen with Abraham. He knew from the beginning what would ultimately happen on Sinai. He knew from the beginning what would happen throughout the Old Testament. He knew from the beginning that the prophets were not going to be sufficient. He knew from the beginning that the judges were not going to be sufficient. He knew from the beginning all of these things. And that's a hard thing to get your head around, right? Because then we ask the standard human questions, right? Well, then why, whatever your question is, I don't profess to know all of them. And that's the point that our special saint is trying to make, right? That if you can comprehend it, if you get your head around it, then it's not gone. And so in this case, you have this decision before. And I think sometimes as parents we do that. We will let our kids go do something. We know full well how it's going to go, right? We'll just stand there and go, sure, go ahead. Right? And then as soon as you're ready, we'll resolve it. And you'll just stand there and you'll wait. And once your kid develops the humility necessary to survive, they'll come to you and go, I don't get it. And you'll go, no kidding. Right? Luckily, God doesn't do that with us. Right? Although I think he probably does. Because I always, like with the students in class, I always do that. This is my shock face, so what you're saying. Right? Because I'm not surprised. I'm sure Jesus looks at you with a shock face a lot. If we continue to read, in Luke 2, now we have this event. So we have this decision to redeem. We then have the fall. which, whatever your ability your desire to understand original sin and the fall. And then we have this sort of process of redemption. And so in Luke 2, we see, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. So this is going back to the Davidic covenant, where God promised to David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. It says, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no room available for them. So, obviously, we all know this part of the story. The idea that we had, this tremendous scene that has become our nativity, that has been in front of churches all over America for the last 18,000 years. So we have this first kind of establishment here in Bethlehem, where God establishes both redemption and expectation. So now God reaches out to create a moment where redemption becomes about our connection with Him. He removes the role of the religious establishment to a certain degree, but He reaches out. So Jesus begins this sort of exampling and mentoring us through actions. I joke around with the football team all the time that my days of modeling are over, right? So if I tell you how to do something and they go, I don't get it, can you show me? My answer is no, right? Because my days of modeling are over, right? Last couple times I tried it, it ended badly. There was screaming and crying, and it wasn't because I hit the kid so hard. It's because the hamstrings are a little tight. And I take a helmet to the face. Whatever. It's an improvement. But it's my days of that are over. But in this case, God does something. In the Old Testament, we see these tremendous shock and awe covenants, right? They're awesome. First one's creation. That was kind of cool. That was shock and awe, right? Then we see Noah. Shock and awe, right? I mean, yeah, sure, the rain, the flooding, great. But think about walking outside in the morning and having the animals lined up 2 by 2, right? And having the bear behind the salmon. You assume the fish weren't on the boat? You limit God? See how strong your faith is. But you have all these. I mean, can you imagine that moment? Like, Noah walks out. He's like, hey, whoa. And I'm sure his kids, who were adults, were also like, this is spectacular, shock and awe moment, right?
Right.
I know. It's not shock and awe because you hear about it in children's church all the time. Children's church ruined it. But there was shock and awe in the moment. I mean, just crazy. Then the rain falls and this giant boat floats, right? Built by a dude that I don't know was a shipbuilder. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But you have this tremendous thing going on, shock and awe. Right? And then you have this moment where here comes the branch with the bird, and you're like, we're going to live. What an amazing moment. And the fact that you're locked on the ark with all these aggressive predators, and they're all cool. Right? Like, kind of crazy. And then you have Abraham. Abraham's just hanging around. And all of a sudden, hey, right? Cool. Awesome moment. And you read this story about Abraham and just how tremendously faith-filled he was, and how remarkable this interaction was, and how rare this interaction was. Then you see Sinai, right? Which, to me is the one, right? That's the shock and awe moment of the entire history of humanity. Look at the stuff that God does in a very short period of time, right? You got pillar of fire, smoke on a mountain, parting of the Red Sea, and these are all just manifestations of authority, power, and impressiveness. God leaves no question, no doubt, right? Throws Pharaoh's army into the sea. How awesome is that? All those miracles, all the craziness, whether it's manna and, and all the stuff going on. It's just like, look at this, fireworks going off. And then we come to Christmas. And we have this sort of exempling of Jesus that's not so much necessarily to example, this sort of shock and awe, while there is a little bit of that. It's really about ushering in an example for us. And this sort of hand extended. And Paul writes, he says, in your relationships with one another. So this is how we interact with each other now. He says, have the same mindset as Jesus. Now we've heard the what would Jesus do, right? I'm sure many of us had the WWJD bracelet at some point, right? And we talk all the time about being Christ-like. Christians means little Christs, right? We have all these things. But Paul kind of gets at all of it in sort of where it fits in the redemptive process when he says, have the same mindset as Jesus, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Part 1. Did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Man, I'd use that to my advantage. Right? I mean, I think that all the time. Like, if I was God right now, next 15 minutes for you would be awful, bro. Right? The reality is he did not use it to his own advantage, but rather he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, which is the Christmas story. Takes the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, being found in appearance as a man, humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. So, in the incarnation, when God became flesh, there is also the acceptance of, in the process of becoming flesh, there is now the mandatory nature of death. All right? It's one of the hardest realities of life when we look at life, is that when we see, life begins at the same time life ends. Have you ever been in the hospital like Kaiser? I know Kaiser does, I actually remember who it is, but when a baby's born, they play the little, but the reality is also what's also happening in the hospital, right? Is that someone's passing away. We have this cycle that is this sort of the beginning and the end cycle. And so in the incarnation, Jesus becomes flesh, he becomes a servant, but he also accepts what that means. He accepts that it means physical pain, he accepts that it means hunger, he accepts that it means overcoming human weakness, it accepts that it means all of the things that you see us failing at throughout the Old Testament. It accepts the fact that he sees death as an inevitability. Now, most of us don't like to think that way, but it is. There's only a couple of Elishas, right? The rest of us are not going out on flaming chariots, although that would be awesome, right? The rest of us are going to ultimately embrace what is death, and so he accepts all of that. That is the ultimate in servant role. But it is also bigger than that. It is also the exempling of. And I think a lot of times, if we, kind of what ultimately is going to be the summation of this, is that when we accept what Christmas is, which is the acceptance of the role of a servant, and how it really is this modeling, exempling for us, it really is what we're supposed to do in everything that we do, right? Because then we have Emmanuel, right, which is God with us. Doesn't just mean he's with us and, I feel him in the room, which is nice, by the way. That's cool, right? It doesn't mean that, I walk into a room and Jesus is here, right? That's not what Emmanuel means. Emmanuel means God with us, which means he gets it. He's here. He's walked with us. He's spent time with us. He's walked with us. He's walked as us. He's dealt with our struggle. He's dealt with our pain. He's dealt with our, the loss that is humanity, right? Because what happens when he walks up and he finds out Lazarus is dead? Does the Bible say he does? He cries. He doesn't walk up and go, no problem, right? Check this out. Check this out. That's just reality. It doesn't mean that, he just walks up and he looks at the tomb and he becomes overwhelmed with the reality that Lazarus is going to die. Now, he's going to bring him up in that moment, but Lazarus dies. Right? That's always one of the great truths of that story, is that he says, Lazarus, come forward. Right? And Lazarus comes walking out and he's like, dude, how long was I out? Right? But he knows that no matter what, he's going to go back and he's going to die. So he's weeping for the loss that is inevitable, right? He's weeping for the loss that he knows. And so we have this God with us thing. Unlike so many, unlike every other situation that we talk about when people talk about their spirituality, people talk about their religion, the reality of Emmanuel, God with us. That our God gets us. He didn't just send, he didn't just send this idea of a prophet. It was greater than that. And then we also see, in Emmanuel, we see humility, sacrifice, and love. The humility, willing to be us. I mean, you talk about a step down. Right? Listen, you're all amazing, wonderful examples of humanity. And maybe the top 30, 40 in the world of examples, quality DNA, and no flaws, okay? No pain, no hurts, right? We're all peak examples of physical fitness. But the reality is, listen, I'm not questioning your amazingness, okay? But he stepped away from this to this. And this year I coached the little bobbleheads for the first time. Right? I never had coached little 6, 7, and 8-year-olds in my life. After all these years of coaching high schoolers, and I was like, hey, Travis just said I'll play if you coach. And I was like, dang it, right? That was a bummer. And I said, all right, buddy, I'll coach. Every person in the program that I've run for, or been a part of running for 6 or 7 years now, was like, you're doing what? And I said, I'm coaching the bobbleheads. And they're like, why? And I said, because I'm looking for a challenge. Right? It's about time I have to work a little bit. But everybody thought, what a step down to get in there with the bobbleheads. And I'm coaching scrimmages, they're not even games. Of course, we did finish 8-1-1, but there's no official score. We did rattle off 7 wins in a row. It's all just learning. Nobody's competitive. And I didn't run up the score. I didn't run up the score on the Catholic teams. It's just an accident. But I had everybody always just constantly looking at me, going, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" And I started with because my son asked me to. And then it kind of ended the year with, because it's awesome. Dude, these guys are hilarious. I mean, it's like talking to tree stumps. And herding cats. We're going to run right. Which way is that? That's your left, buddy. You got it. And then he runs out. You just have no idea what's going on. But it was so much fun. It was such a challenge. But it was so great. But people looked at me and they thought, you're nuts. What are you doing? And it ended up being such a fulfilling, just fun year for me. And hopefully the parents had a great time and they saw that I had a great time. And I spent it turned into basically every night practice was 2 hours of football and at least 1 hour of me laughing. Because I have no idea what these kids are doing, right? Just none. And it was so much fun. And tonight we have our banquet, the program we have our program like banquet, and I was thinking about those kids this morning and I thought, I have so much respect and compassion for these kids, and I'm excited about seeing them again. I'm excited about high-fiving, especially little Mauricio, who was probably my favorite. Little Mo was probably my favorite kid, because he just stared at me all year. I think finally said one word at the end of the year, which was like, you're like, get over here, Mauricio, what are you doing? Never mind that. But it was this, it was out of love and it was out of sacrifice for my son that I chose to do it. But so many people saw it as this, why are you doing it? Now think of it in something that really matters. Think of it in terms of, we all watch that, Undercover Boss. How crazy it is that they get in there with their employees and their employees respect them for it. As Christians, we're looking at the idea that Jesus stepped out of heaven and into our circumstances. He stepped out of heaven and not into good, easy peasy, no big deal circumstances. He stepped into he stepped into a time when the people that he chose to come into at that point in time were oppressed, right? Were controlled. He stepped into a time when there was a lot of fear, when there was a lot of turmoil, when there was a lot of conflict. And one of my, another great quote from Augustine, is that it was pride that changed angels into devils, and it's humility that makes men as angels. And humility is at the core of who we are. As Christians, it should be who we are. We should be willing to step into anybody's circumstances. And I hear all the time, this is one of my favorite conversations with the kids in class, in the Bible class that I teach, is that they always say, how do we live? What's expected of me? Right? Because everybody wants to know how to get the A. Right? Nobody wants to think for themselves. They just want to get the A. And it goes back to this example. If you go back to what Paul said, it's like, there you go. Be a humble servant. Never fall so in love with your station, your power and your authority, that you can't look at everybody as the image bearers of God. And it doesn't matter how much you get along with them or don't get along with them. They are the image bearers of God. One of the greatest, there's not a single problem in the world that wouldn't be solved with these things. Not a single problem on earth that wouldn't be resolved with sacrifice and love. When people are hurting, sacrifice and love. But selfishness is what kills it. And the Christmas day, I hate to say story because it makes it sound big. The Christmas event is the reality of sacrifice and love. Because, we read the story, and we'll read the story just to make it very Christmassy today. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone through them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, don't be afraid. Because that's the response, right? Don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. Great joy to all people who are oppressed, people who are in a bad situation, people who are being ordered around by their oppressors, people who are under the thumb of Rome. And he says, this will be a sign to you. Did I caught up? No. Almost skipped a beat. This will be a sign to you. You'll find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger. Suddenly a great company of the heavenly hosts appeared with the angel praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest. And on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests. So, obviously, as we close this morning, you have the emotional spectrum of the shepherds. How exciting it must have been to be a part of this. To be a part of something that's way above your station. To be the ones invited to that moment, right? To be the ones with the backroom pass to go meet the band, right? The shepherds are like, come on in. I mean, the angels are like, come on in. And then you have the impossibility of Christ's example at the same time. A baby. Born into difficult circumstance. And you ask the question, why come as a child? Why not something more authoritative, imposing, and brash, right? We talked about all those things from the Old Testament, right? All those powerful moments. Why not come as that? Love, humility, and sacrifice baffle the human mind and challenge our expectations of God. Because The idea that the God we serve is humble, that chose this sort of humble place, is hard to comprehend. I know we get the stories confused because we so fall in love with what has become the retailized Jesus. We become so confused because we've fallen in love with the Christmas Carol Jesus. We've fallen in love with this sort of almost a caricature of Christ. We fall in love with what exaggerates the feel-good of our retail holiday. Right? And we miss out on the idea that God chose humility. God chose sacrifice. And he did all of that before we chose to sin. Jesus was not, oh fine, I'm done, let's just do it this way. Jesus was a decision long before that. And the expression of power would not be surprising. There is power there, right? We have the angels, we have the star, we have the virgin birth, we have all of these things that are so crazy and awesome, but yet, really in the end, it's the expression of love that's the greatest surprise of all. Because we didn't deserve it. We don't deserve it. We still don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. I don't have any right or access to it. I only have access to it because he allows me to have access to it. I have access to grace because he has said, I will give you grace. He did not say, you will get grace because you seem like a pretty legit dude. Right? He was modeling for us exactly how we're to act in this Christmas season. And one of my favorite things to do is looking at the invite list, right? Shepherds, a bastard child, teenage girl, blue-collar workers, strangers, the impoverished. All the people you invited to the day your child was born, probably. Right? You're like, listen, just go find somebody. This is a big day. Go get me as many smelly shepherds as you can and bring them in here to the delivery room. My wife will appreciate it. Who's this? I don't know. He's the image of God, though, and you're welcome. Right? I'm sure when Mary got the original call, this is exactly what she was expecting. You're going to give birth to the Messiah. And she went, yes, shepherds. Right? She went, oh, I get to carry the Messiah? I cannot wait to give birth in a cave. Right? So the idea ultimately is this, is when we look around the room, we see the same list. Right? Everybody in this room is a stinky shepherd. Impoverished, flawed. I'm not going to say all, most of you are Gentiles. The reality is we have been given access to this humility, love, and grace. And that's what Christmas is about. Christmas is about remembering that part of the redemption story. That God chose to extend his hand out of heaven and model for us humility. And you look around our world right now, you look around our country, you look around our city, our community, we have an absence of humility. We live in a society that just gets giddy about celebrity, fame. You look at our public servants are more about being famous now than actually serving the public around them. We live in a society that sacrificing for somebody else seems a bit much to ask because I don't have much for myself. And the reality is that we have this idea of what love is. It's not really what God's standard of love is, but we don't see a lot of genuine concern for others. We don't stop and correct each other anymore because we've decided that love means no correction. That love means whatever you want to do, I'm with you. Right? And that's not what Jesus came to do. Jesus did not come to earth and go, okay, I'm not here to say anything edgy, just here to love on you. He did. He came and he talked and he shared and he exampled for us teaching and discipleship, and that's really what it's supposed to be. Love, humility, and sacrifice is really what it's about. And it's about stepping out of wherever your station is and looking around you and becoming aware of the fact that, man, we live in a hurting world. And we live in a world that really has no idea what truth is. We live in a world that has no idea what it means to not be selfish. And I'm going to tell you right now, we live in a world, the lesson we are learning right now from those who run our countries and our community is that do the right thing unless the people around you don't. And if they don't, then do what they do, because that's okay. And the reality is as Christians, and I'm so glad that Jesus did it the way he did it and modeled for us, what he modeled for us. So, message this morning as we close in prayer is, hey, you know what? Get out there and be humble. Love on some people, and you know what? It's a great time of the year to sacrifice, because people are in tremendous need. And look around you. Think about somebody in your community you can impact. Think about somebody in your world you can impact. Think about a kid who could use your time. And we're going to receive our offering as we pray. So let's close. Father, I just thank you so much for this morning, God. I thank you so much for the example of your Son. I thank you so much for your willingness to extend a hand from eternity into time, to show us how much you love us. And God, I just pray right now that we can receive that, and we can go example, as you exampled for us, that we can be as you were. God, we pray your blessing over the offering this morning. God, we pray that you just bless each and every penny that comes in, Father, that it is for the furthering of your kingdom. And God, we thank you for that. We look forward to a wonderful Christmas week and a half. Probably a lot of time with family and friends. And God, may we have patience with our family. In your name, amen. All right, so next Sunday is Christmas Eve. So we are going to have service in the morning. We're going to do it earlier than normal. We're going to do a 9 to 10. 1 hour, no children's things. We're just all going to be in here. And we're going to sing some songs. And we're going to do a little Christmas communion. See what I did there? That's right. That's right. Twice a year, whether we need to. So we'll do a little Christmas communion next Sunday and sing some carols. We'll blast it out on Facebook just so everybody remembers. So come on out. It'll be just a little short Christmas season, and we'll dismiss you to your family brunches and your whatever your Christmas Eve traditions are. I assume it's something Dr. Seussy, Christmas ham or a Christmas feast or whatever it's called. So you guys are good to go. Let's go have fun and let's make a difference out there.